is Adam Siegel.
My name is Carolina Corrett.
And I'm Scarlett Gillen. When writing a paper, the majority of the content should be in your own words. However, your thoughts should be supported by evidence borrowed from other sources. New research is almost always based on other sources. Also, remember that it is vital to both integrate source info and introduce it in a trustworthy, credible way. Knowing whether to quote, paraphrase, or summarize is essential. You can do any of these in order to properly cite evidence. However, it is most typical for humanities researchers to quote and social and natural scientists to paraphrase. This is not always the case, but most often times it is. To know for certain, though, there are the principles. You summarize when details are irrelevant or a source isn't important enough to warrant the space. You paraphrase when you state what a source says more clearly or concisely than the source does, or when your argument depends on the details of the source but not its specific words. And you quote when the words themselves are your evidence, and you need to deal with them exactly as they appear in the original source. A good summary leaves out details. In a paper, you should exclude the source and details, only mentioning the main points, and, if need be, points that could change the reader's perspective. When including details in a summary, you should make it shorter than the original, include only the main points, ensure that it is objective, include in-text reference, and make sure it is in the writer's own words.
As Scarlett mentioned, when summarizing, you want to take the main relevant points and put them into your summary. The same thing goes for paraphrasing. When paraphrasing, you want to take the gist of what your source said and just rephrase it, reimagine it, or reiterate it. As you can see, versus a direct quote, the paraphrase is much more concise and it makes you look like you know what you're talking about. If the reader sees your page and it's just covered in quotes, they're going to think that you made no contribution, and for that, they might as well go to the source itself to get the information. So there are two kinds of quotations. There are run-in quotations and block quotations. With the run-in quotation, you want to integrate the quotation into your own sentence structure as shown. You use a run-in quotation when quoting 4 or less lines. With the block quotation, you want to take whatever you're quoting from your source and separate it from your own writing, and you'll use this when quoting 5 or more lines. You can always modify a quotation to make it fit better into whatever you want to write. You can do so by adding, deleting, or changing what your source said, as long as you don't take it out of context or change the meaning. Additionally, you want to indicate whatever changes you make by putting symbols. A square bracket will indicate any insertions you made, and the ellipsis or the ... will indicate any deletions you made. So here we have an original quote versus a modified quote, and you can see exactly where they deleted text and exactly where they inserted text.
Not only are putting quotations and paraphrases important to put in your work, but knowing how to properly introduce them is just as crucial. The most common method that we use is introducing before the quote. We're going to examine this quote that Carolyn mentioned earlier. Circumstances change and past primacy is no guarantee of future primacy from Jared Diamond. Now first things first, before you even decide to use a quote, you need to fully understand what it means. So in this case, primacy means being important or being primary. So Diamond is saying that as time passes on, people's priorities change. The first method is before the quote. To do this, you would start by saying, as in Diamond's view, or Diamond states, or Diamond shows that societies can't change, and then you go on and read into your quote. Or if you want to be a bit more ambiguous, you can not give the source name in your intro and go on and cite it later. So for example, a wise man once said that circumstances change. If you want to switch things up a bit, which is fine from time to time, you can introduce in the middle of the quote. Circumstances change, argues Diamond, and goes on to state that in past primacy is no guarantee of future primacy. Or at the end of the quote, circumstances change, and past primacy is no guarantee of future primacy, argues Diamond. Along with when to introduce your quote, how you introduce it is just as important. Experienced writers, and so should you, tend to veer away from more commonly used verbs like said or says, and offer more complex verbs that not only explain your quote, but tell the reader how you want them to interpret it. There are 4 types of verbs that we use. All-purpose verbs, to be used when you have basically information, a claim, an opinion from a source. Into this, you would say the author notes, claims, adds, anything like that. And generally, that information is neutral. There are verbs for argued claims, such as the author contends, argues, maintains, and that would be used generally when they're giving an argument. And if that information is convincing, you would say the author shows or determines. There are verbs for opinions. The author believes, assumes, declares, and if that information is weak, you could say that they want to believe or just assume. And finally, there are verbs for matters of judgment. infer, like the author concludes or the author infers. For whichever scenario, every scenario when you're introducing a quote is different, so you need to make sure that you use the best one for that specific quotation or paraphrase.
Overall, the content's compatibilities include summary, paraphrasing, and quotations. But how do you mold these aspects in order to form an effective and successful essay? Well, here's an example. As Diamond points out, the lesson for the modern world in the history of the Fertile Crescent summary is that you can't count on history to repeat itself and paraphrase because circumstances change and past primacy is no guarantee of future primacy. Quotations. By using quotations in your summaries, you are able to avoid a cut and paste format. But the question is, how do you use quotations if you can't interpret them? Where is your sense of reliability, authenticity, the proof that you are the source that the audience can lean on? And how do you prevent a maze of confusion? Well, here's an application you could use in order to solve this issue. When Hamlet comes upon his stepfather Claudius at prayer, he logically analyzes whether to kill him on the spot, your claim, or your main idea. First, he wants to kill Claudius immediately, but then he pauses to think. If he kills Claudius while he is praying, he sends his soul to heaven. But he wants Claudius damned to hell, so he coolly decides to kill him later, your interpretive introduction or your paraphrase. Now you need your evidence. And so am I revenged, but this villain kills my father, and for that I, his sole son, do the same villain sent to heaven. Why? This is hired and salary, not revenge. As you can see, the evidence is under quotations. Ultimately, by citing your evidences, as stated by my colleague Scarlett, and then paraphrasing it to your own advantage to form a claim, as discussed by Carolina, and then merging in those quotations, as stated by Adam, you are able to mentally connect to your audience in a trustworthy atmosphere. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
All right, so let's go through. I do have questions for you, so I'm just going to go from Scarlett over. All right, and I'm sorry, I'm cheating looking at the list. Shh. What did you feel was the most, of this presentation, what did you find to be the most challenging, and why?
Deciding which parts of the textbook to leave in and take out, because clearly the whole chapter, there was a lot of information to discuss. And so we really just, well, I personally picked out the main points from the subtitles and then.
Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. No, you're fine. You're fine. It's laid back right now. In what way did you improve your ability to work with a group with this particular project?
I think the way that I improved my ability was just watching my fellow colleagues present because they're very inspiring in my opinion, and I think we all have benefited from each other to learn how we present and ways to improve through that.
Thank you. Where do you think you can go from now with your presentation skills?
What I think can go from now for my presentation skills is honestly looking at my sources and my illustrations on the board in order to improve them, to associate them with what I'm saying, instead of just using pictures that aren't relevant to the topic.
You're gonna get a round of applause for your answer. How does working with a group help your own research?
It helps me because it allows me to kind of give and take constructive criticism. So whatever my shortcomings are, once they point them out, I'm able to fix that.
Okay. Stay up there.